It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It is the Take Command podcast. Craig Hoffman here, Logan Paulsen there, and we will preview the Commanders game this weekend against the Cleveland Browns here in just a few minutes. But first, let's take care of our own business, Logan. We always start in-house, right? You got to take care of you before you worry about the opponent. Not that we play or anything, but for the Commanders this week, they have to deal with what is growing national attention. They have to deal with their quarterback being hyped up everywhere, with themselves being hyped up everywhere. Guys like Terry finally getting the love that they deserve and should have been getting for a long time. But you don't get love when you're on bad football teams. And this has largely been a not great football team over the past bunch of years. And that's just a reality that we're all keenly aware of. So I thought it was interesting. Dan Quinn and Jayden talked about this on Wednesday, and I can talk more about what they said in a little bit if folks haven't heard it yet. And if you do, I will say, if you do want to hear directly from them, we play the audio on the radio show, so you can check out the Hoffman Show podcast and those segments to hear the direct quotes. We're not going to play them here. But generally speaking, Logan, obviously 2012 is the year that would come to mind in your career for you having to deal with this as you start to ramp up the attention, and all of a sudden you have the splashy quarterback who everyone's talking about. What's that like as a team to deal with, and how hard is it to stay focused as they come back home and have this really, interesting stretch of games coming up where they could come out of this, favorites in the NFC East if things go, I would say if they play up to their potential over the next month.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is when you're winning football games, it's great and everything's going really well. And I think there's a tendency for teams to get. So I've been a part of different teams, right? You mentioned the 2012 team. That team was very unique in that when we started on that 7-game win streak, I've never been part of a more confident team. It was like every single week we're going in and we're going to win this football game. Every single week, there was no doubt in our minds. But then I've been a part of other teams where you win 2 games and then all of a sudden people start talking about you in a very positive light. And for whatever reason, you don't have the emotional maturity as a team to carry that success into the 3rd game or the 4th game, and you come out, you're not prepping exactly the way you should. You're not attacking it with the focus that you should necessarily, and you get smoked. And I think that's the thing when I talk to Tana, when I talk to Fred, when I talk to London, guys that are, that I work with for the team, that's kind of a concern that we all have, is because we're around the team a lot. We don't get to interact with them the same way we used to, but what is the emotional maturity level of the team? And I think that's something that I keep coming back to, and I'm always kind of guarding myself against is this is a lot of responsibility. Like when you turn on SportsCenter, it's Jayden Daniel all day 24/7. And you're 24 years old, you're in a big city, there's a lot of stuff to do, there's a lot of people that are trying to get to you, family, friends, people in the community. And how do you kind of stay siloed and stay focused? And it was interesting hearing Tana talk on the Command Center podcast about his experience with that and how early in his career he'd be up with the wins and down with the losses. He'd go out and hang out and party and do all this stuff. And then he got to a point in his career where he kind of said to himself, this is not beneficial for me. This is not helping me. So I need to stay on the same note. And when you hear the presser, when you hear Dan talk about it, when you hear Jay, and that's definitely been a theme of what they're doing. There's one thing to talk about it. There's another thing to be about it. And I think the only way we'll know if they're a mature roster is if they come out here and they beat the Cleveland Browns, or if they play well. Okay. And I think playing well doesn't mean they're going to win the game, but if they play with consistency, if they play with poise, all those things will show you something about the composition of the team. And it is a little bit, like I said, it's something that I'm worried about because they are kind of a young roster in one sense, but they also have these very experienced pillars. They've got the Zach Ertz, the Bobby Wagners, the Austin Eckler's, guys that you can look to. So I think this is a huge game to kind of show the emotional maturity of the team, because this is a different, when we're going to talk about this when we preview them, it's a different caliber of defense than they've played the last 2 weeks specifically. It's much more in the same vein as Tampa Bay. It's definitely not a top 10 defense, but it's better than, I think the last 3 teams they've played have been bottom, 25, 27 in the NFL. Yeah. So different caliber, different points of emphasis, different types of playmakers. And can you stay the course, win a home game, and and be the team that we all kind of in the area are hoping that you are.
Yeah, I mean, this is a franchise that's had a bunch of different teams that have had little runs and potential, and it's like, oh, are they going to be good? And then home games is where, like, dreams have gone to die. Like Landover's just been I like we talked about it before the Giants game. I obviously didn't go to a bunch of games, and like nobody went to games in 2020, but 2021, 2022. But it had been since like 2019 since I saw a win at Landover covering a game there. Like it was crazy how bad they were at home. And so, you look at that aspect and that pitfall is there. The youth we're going to talk about in a second, although I do think that there's something specific to the way this roster is built that I like that's different than a lot of other young teams. But it starts with Jayden. Like it starts with the fact that the guy with the most attention doesn't really care. And he's as used to it as you can be for someone in his shoes, right? This is a direct quote from the press conference yesterday on if people can call him a star rookie and how he feels about his success. Man, y'all can say whatever y'all want. I'm still a rookie in my eyes. So I let everybody else do the talking for me. I don't get caught up in that stuff. But man, it's just a blessing, just the preparation. Obviously, the team believing in me, and we're going to go out there and compete every Sunday. Like, I think that's real. I don't think that's him trying to say the right things. Like, I think this is a guy that is super motivated. We were talking before we started recording about my chat with Mark Schlereth, which will be in the feed tomorrow. If folks want to check that out, or if you can't wait, it's in the Hoffman Show feed from earlier in the week. But Mark talked about how he's talking with Cliff, and it's like 7:00 in the morning out in Arizona when they're having their production meeting on Saturday morning at the hotel ahead of Mark calling the game on Fox. And he's talking to Cliff, and he's like, how was this week? Because they're out there in Arizona. They're doing things a little differently, or they're trying not to do things differently because they're away from home the entirety of last week. And that included Jayden Daniels still being up at 5:30 every morning and like popping by Cliff's office. Like Cliff gets there super early, famously, and who pops by at 5:30 out there in the makeshift office of the offensive coordinator in Arizona because he's up doing his work like usual. It's Jayden Daniels. And so he has not changed his approach. He has not changed his preparation. And because he went through the whole Heisman rigmarole last year, I think he is far more prepared for this than a lot of other people. And there was something else that Jayden said during his presser that I think was also, like, to me, the core thing, the most important thing. He realizes this attention is coming from playing well. This isn't like any reflection of his personality or, some charity work he did or something else, or just, people like his suit on draft night. I don't know. Anything off the field. People are loving Jayden Daniels because he's playing well. So even if he likes the attention, the way to keep getting it is playing well. And he centered in his answer, the reason all this is happening is because we're playing well and it's on the field. And so we have to stay focused and keep doing what's right on the field. And realizing that this is happening because of the work that you're putting in incentivizes you to continue putting in the work if you frame it that way. And I think that is very much how Jayden Daniels thinks of this.
I hope so. I hope that that's true. And I think you're right about the Heisman thing last year. I think he's been exposed to stuff like this before. But man, when you turn on ESPN, when you turn on NFL Network, when I'm in my Instagram feed, when I'm on YouTube, there are some insane takes out there about him. And I think he's perfectly capable of handling this, but it just takes a special person. Like, think about, us on this show. You get a weird comment on one of the shows. You're like, man, did I really do that? Do I need to change my approach?
Right.
And so imagine getting, 500,000 of those, of people kind of giving every take they can possibly give about what they think about you and the pressure that's on him. So as long as he can stay focused and stay to his routine and stay to his process, I think there's a really good shot that this team's going to be successful because, as we've talked about, there's a lot of factors in the team's success, but he's a major one. So if he can play with this level of consistency that he's played over the last couple of weeks, yeah, there's going to be a really cool opportunity to beat the Cleveland Browns and then go into Baltimore and, we'll see what happens. Right. But even saying that as a former player gets me, I have a little bit of anxiety. Like, I just started sweating. Like, the fact that I'm even talking about skipping over Cleveland, like if we beat Cleveland, then this, like, let's focus on Cleveland. So I think there is the temptation, probably in the locker room too, but if the leadership's correct, if the coaching's right, all those factors line up, all those intangible things line up, you're going to be okay. You just got to take care of business this weekend and kind of block out the noise. And I think Dan does a really good job of that in saying, you as the media want to create this roller coaster, create this thing that we're riding on. It's like, we're not going to get on the roller coaster. We're doing our thing. And I think that is really, really powerful. So as long as they can execute that, because saying it's one thing, executing it's another, but as long as they can execute that, this could be a really special Commanders team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's important to point out, like, the media, like, we're just doing our job on our end, right? Like, it's,
I'm not saying we're like bad people, but I'm saying like
but I also get that, like, our jobs are different, right? Like, our job in the media is to talk about it. Their job as players is to be about it. Like, they have to go out and do the thing. Our job is to say, like, hey, this, that, like, because I'll have people call up sometimes or leave comments, which I definitely read too many of, and go like, oh, hey, one game at a time. And I'm like, I'm not playing. I have no impact on the result. And by the way, if I do, like, that is a problem. If I have an impact on the result because of things that I am saying or that you are saying or that anybody in the media sphere, Stephen A. Smith, is saying, like, that is a problem within the team. That is not the media's responsibility is not to take it one game at a time. And so, like, yeah, have I said this week that Jayden Daniels is in the MVP conversation? Absolutely, because through 4 games he is. Like, what am I supposed to do? Not say it? Now, does that mean he's a lock to win the MVP and that he doesn't have to do anything? You said that?
You are out there, man. You and Stephen A. Smith are holding hands over here.
Right, yeah. Famously, I agree with everything he says. I would do my Stephen A. Smith impression, but I tried it once on the radio this week, and my throat is not up to that at this time. Well. Yeah, no, I choked on it, and it was almost bad. It almost derailed me for an entire show. So we're not going to do that right now. The point is, like, if the season ended today, he's getting MVP votes. Like, that's not outrageous to say. Now, there's a long way to go of him, making sure that he continues to do these things if he wants to stay in that conversation. It's 4 games. It's 1 quarter of the season. You have 3 quarters plus this extra game to go. But like, I don't think that we should, quell our commentary of reality. Just, like, put it in context of it's only 4 games.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point to point out. The other thing that I would say, though, on the team side of it, I think that because this team was built in the exact way that it is, which I'll explain in more detail in a second, it is, I don't say uniquely, but like very specially built to handle something like this. And what I mean by that is they didn't take any sacrifices on culture this year. They had no mandate from ownership to be, hey, you better win 7 games, you better win 6 games. And they didn't take any shortcuts. Like, literally the primary goal of this season was to build the locker room the right way. And so when it came to the free agents they signed, when it came to especially the veteran leaders they pursued, when it came to who they drafted, every single guy in that locker room is exactly what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn wanted from a culture standpoint. And unlike other teams that might have taken a few shortcuts, then you catch a nice little wind and you win a couple games in a row, and now you got some hype and some people are maybe believing too much of themselves. Like, Zach Ertz knows exactly who he is. Bobby Wagner knows exactly who he is. These rookies are, they come in with this rookie, white belt mentality, if you will. We just enter the gym and we're just trying to learn. Like, so I think because this locker room, and maybe this is me being overly optimistic, you tell me, but I think because of the ownership not mandating anything, the general manager trying to build a culture, and the head coach trying to build a culture above everything else, now all of a sudden they're playing good football. And that culture, it makes them a little more resilient than I think a lot of other NFL teams would be to buying into their own hype. And that ultimately could pay off in a major way as they continue to roll, or especially if they continue to roll here, because that hype would only grow.
Yeah, and I think we won't. This is something we can't know. It's unknowable until they face some type of significant adversity, I feel. And I think when you look at obviously the Arizona game, people say, oh, he threw his first pick. I mean, he threw his first pick, but the defense comes out, they get a 3-and-out, and they go down and they score, and they're up by 30 points or whatever it is. It's how significant was that adversity? But if they're in a dogfight against Cleveland, that again, we talked about the defense a little bit better. The offense played better against Oakland. I'm not saying that's the best team in football or anything like that, but they have a moment where it's the offense isn't clicking, the defense is struggling, they're down. What does the sideline look like? What does the composure of the team look like? And that, to me, is going to be maybe the most indicative of the stuff you're talking about in terms of is the roster built the right way? And you can't know it until they face some adversity. And again, you say, oh, well, Cincinnati, they faced some adversity, but it was pretty, as far as adversity goes, they led the whole time. You felt pretty good about it. It wasn't anything crazy, right? So when that adversity strikes, what does that look like? And in the 2012 team, I'll tell you, we'd be down. I think we were down to Cleveland. Actually, I forget. It was like week 15 or 16, and Kirk was playing quarterback, and it was like, are we the right team? Are we composed the right way? And we just put our nose to the stone. Every single person on the roster won the game. And that was just because of all the confidence we'd accrued over the last kind of 4 or 5 games of winning football. And we just believed in ourselves. And so is this team there yet? I don't know. And I really am. I think, to your point, there's a lot of structures in place, the coaching staff, the leadership, the types of guys they brought in that would say yes. But you ultimately don't know until you're in the fire. And I know that's maybe not the most like hardcore answer of all time, but I think that's the thing that I'm looking for next is when it's not going perfect, how does the team respond?
I'm 100% with you. I'm very intrigued to see what that looks like when they face adversity, because they just, like you said, haven't. My best guess is that they'll be all right. But that's a guess, and that's what we do. That's punditry for you, Logan. We're out here guessing. All right, so how does it look for Jayden Daniels and company on the field against Cleveland? A Browns defense led, of course, by Myles Garrett. They are very aggressive. They got a lot of blitzes that they'll throw at you. But I think that there's some opportunities after watching them on tape, Logan. Like I do think that there is a possibility, and I can lay this out depending on how this conversation goes. If you don't lay it out, like I think there's a scenario where Jayden Daniels goes for 300 yards and like has a heck of a day. There's also a situation where it goes all horribly wrong. Like the swath of outcomes here feels incredibly wide. What do you see when you watch him, though, and how do you think that Cliff starts to think about attacking them?
Yeah, I think you see a defense that was, and you understand why last year they were maybe the most talented defense in football. They have a lot of pieces on the defensive line. Obviously, Myles Garrett, they've got Zadarius Smith, they've got Obo Okorokwo, they've got Isaiah McGuire, guys that are really good, consistent pass rushers. They've got Alex Wright, a guy they drafted a couple years ago. He's got some pass rush juice inside. And so they are capable of kind of beating you with a 4-man rush. You look at the linebackers, you got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the guy from Notre Dame that everyone was super high on. He plays with his hair on fire. Devin Bush, right? Jordan Hicks. That second level of defense is doing a great job, man. They absolutely ripped to the football. Grant Delpit is the free safety, and he's a big, strong, physical guy, kind of in the mold of like a Jeremy Chin type guy, kind of a box player, but maybe a little bit more athletic, more coverage upside. Like he wears number 9, Owusu-Koramoah wears number 6, and the way they run to the football is awesome. And you're like, man, this front's good. On first and second down, they struggle a little bit, stopping the run sometimes. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because Dalvin Tomlinson's one of the best defensive tackles in football at stopping the run, and he flashes quite a bit. But Shelby Harris, their 3 technique, is a little up and down. And if you get to the second level on this defense, like Owusu-Koramoah is basically like a safety. Grant Delpit's playing in the box a lot. He is a safety. So they have a hard time. I will say the one thing that really jumps out to you is when they get you in a 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, watch out, because they are very, very opportunistic in those moments. And what I mean by that is I went and watched all their 3rd downs from the first 4 games, and it's almost like clockwork. It's like 2nd and 12. And who's getting a sack fumble? Myles Garrett. Or hey, we're playing the Dallas Cowboys and it's a close ball game and Myles Garrett forces you up in the pocket and Owusu-Koramoah blitzes and the ball's out. They're really, really good in those situations because they create so much pressure. To your point, when you watch them in the back end, they're not as consistent as they were last year, and it's really hurt them. Like Martin Emerson is struggling a little bit. Obviously, Denzel Ward, is doing a really nice job on the other side, but Emerson struggled. He's given up a lot of explosive plays, and so there is opportunity there. But the margin for error is much, much smaller than we saw against Arizona, than we saw against Cincinnati. Cincinnati were like, man, they play really good coverage structures and they have one good pass rusher. We were talking about Arizona bringing complicated blitzes. Here, there's 4 or 5 talented pass rushers and they're pretty creative in their blitz schemes. And so if you're not locked in up front and you're in a bad down and distance, they're gonna get you. They've gotten everybody they've played this year at some point. So I look at Washington and I say, that's in some ways that's good because they've been hyper efficient out of staying out of third and longs, right? Jay, we talked about how good Jayden's been at staying out of those situations, picking the right moments to scramble. So there's a lot of really positive things there. And then the other thing is that I would point out is they in these pressures, they like to play a lot of man coverage behind it. Mm-hmm. Do they do that versus Jayden Daniels? Because you watch the Jacksonville game, for example, and Trevor Lawrence scrambles for 40 yards on a pressure where they're very good at containing the passer. There's a little crease and he runs for 40 yards, and Jayden Daniels is going to score a touchdown on that. So this is who they are. Stay out of 3rd and 10. Are they going to shift what they do because of Jayden Daniels' running ability? I think probably a little bit. I think they probably run a little bit more zone pressure, but they're at their core. In those long passing situations, they are there to eat you up and heat up the passer. So the number one thing offensively for me, for Cliff, for Jayden, is how do you stay out of those obvious passing situations? And it is more important this week than any other week they've played so far this season.
No, totally agree. I don't know how much they're going to change because that's not just like Jim Schwartz is Jim Schwartz. Like this dude's been around forever and he is a man blitz, like cover zero, like let's get after it kind of guy. Now, sometimes he's got more exotic stuff in his back. Maybe I should give him more credit than that, but like he's going to be aggressive. The question is how, and maybe he does zone it up a little bit more on the back end, but it's actually the man coverage stuff where I think that Jayden could be really dangerous, not as a runner, but as a thrower. In watching some of these pressures and some of these situations, there are a ton of opportunities missed by quarterback inaccuracy. Like the back end coverage is not sticky. There's some obviously there's plenty of plays you can find where it's real good. But the way that Jayden has thrown the football this year and his accuracy and just the precision and the timing and everything that he's had, if he hits guys in stride, you're going to have serious yak. You're going to have major explosive plays, and it's not just going to be down the field. And I will say, I think there's opportunities down the field. Some of the stuff that we saw against Cincinnati and some of the stuff that we saw at LSU, frankly, some of these box fades, one-on-one coverage, like Cliff will tighten down the splits, give more room to the sideline and like, hey, it's one-on-one coverage. We know it. Let's let it rip. Like some of these throws are the ones that Jayden has lived on. And then you add in the quick game stuff and the accuracy. And I think that there's huge opportunity. That said, he's got to do it with guys in his face and pressure in a muddy pocket and guys around his feet in a way that I don't know that he's had to really do in the NFL. So this is a test. Like if he can merely do what he's done so far, he could throw for 400 yards. But the test is nowhere close to what he's had so far. The test is going to be much, much more difficult, I think. And I do think that forget guys around, his face, if you will. The how does he do with guys around his feet? That is something that I know is a kind of a question coming into the year. And I think they've done a relatively good job of making sure that he hasn't had to deal with that a whole ton. If he's going to make the throws like he did to Luke last week, where he just backs up and then rips one, off platform, sick. But I think that is kind of going to be the test and some of the adversity that he faces this week in terms of trying to stay even 90, 85% as accurate as he has been, because expecting him to complete 85% of his passes every week is a ludicrous level of expectation.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the team that he struggled most with this year, and again, it's his first game, is Tampa Bay, and they heated him up a little bit. And this is a different type of pressure because they have different type of athletes. And I think Tampa Bay did a great job against the Commanders in terms of bringing pressure. And Jayden did a really good job of handling it as a runner. How does he handle it as a passer? I think is another kind of step to that. And it's a different front. Like they're pretty good up front. And I think that's something that I'm really curious to see, is because when you look at Arizona, when you look at Cincinnati, there's not a lot of people around them. They did a really good job of keeping clean pockets. And he's shown an ability, and I'm not detracting from this in any way. Like it's awesome that he can make throws. He can do that from the pocket, but it's a different animal when you're under pressure, because that's something, like you said, they talked about when he was being pressured, his completion percentage goes way down. His desire to throw seems to go way down. So what does that look like in this game? And what is Cliff's plan to stop that? Because like I said, they're not great on first and second down. They're okay on first and second down. They play with their hair on fire. They're physical, but there are creases. And when you watch the Giants game, when you watch the Las Vegas game specifically, they had one of the worst EPAs per rushes in the NFL, and they're gashing these 25-yard runs kind of out of nowhere. And when you watch Las Vegas prior to that, it just wasn't on the film. So obviously they're having a little bit of an issue stopping the run as well. But there's so many things with this defense because I actually like watching their defense. And I know statistically they're not super efficient. I think they're like 17th in points or whatever. I think one of the big reasons that they're having a hard time is because the offense is struggling and they're on the field way more than I think they want to be. And they're not in game flows that they're accustomed to being in where they can just rush the passer and get after you. So I think if that's another way. Obviously we talk about running the football, quick game, play pass. Screens are going to be huge in this game. They've been very successful against them all season. But if you can get a more positive game flow, again, you're up by 10 and you can kind of hold that lead. You're going to really mitigate what that front does well. And so scoring points early is going to be a big deal. But yeah, it's going to be maybe one of the most interesting tests of the year, I think, for Jayden, just because of they kind of attack what people think he doesn't do well. And that's part of their DNA. And to your point about Schwartz, they're going to play a lot of man, they're going to play a lot of zero, or they have. But he also, because he is this attacking pressure style, they run a lot of zone pressures too. So maybe they kind of lean more into that as opposed to the man stuff to account for what Jayden does with his legs. But I think that's going to be a really interesting chess match. And it's kind of one of those things where for Cliff, he knows who Jim Schwartz wants to be. Jim Schwartz knows who Cliff wants to be. How do they adapt to the adaptation of the other person? I think is going to be really, really compelling in this game also.
Yeah. So let's focus on the thing that might actually be the bigger story then, because we all talk about Jayden in the pass game and all that kind of stuff, but I think they probably come out and try to run the hell out of the football. I just put up the next gen stats preview on NFL Pro, and it gives you just an overall passing efficiency, overall rushing efficiency, pressure rate, and its advantage, to either side. It's got a 5-star advantage to Washington in the rushing efficiency category.
Yeah.
Washington is number 2 in the NFL in overall rushing efficiency. The Browns defense is 20th in rushing efficiency. So I think agree. You're going to throw a bunch of pressure on second down, well, let's loft the ball over your head screen style and let's get out. And Austin Eckler on track to play per Dan Quinn on Wednesday. So that is obviously huge if you can get him back and turn some explosive plays in the screen game. But rushing the football, how would you attack this group? And do you think Washington can continue being as successful as they have? Or, is there stuff that Cleveland can pretty easily clean up and get fixed?
Yeah, I think the thing about Cleveland that it reminds me a little bit of Cincinnati. And, it's everyone's like, oh, we got to run the ball versus Cincinnati. And our rushing efficiency in that game, specifically outside of the Austin Eckler big run, was not great. They play in a very similar style. They are fast to the football. They're physical. I think they're bigger and more physical up front than any team we've played outside of Tampa Bay this year. So I think what is the wrinkle this week? We talked about versus Arizona, how Cliff and Anthony Lynn did a great job of creating kind of some new stuff for them to look at, some new fits for them to kind of deal with. And I think that's the thing that's super important because Owusu Koramoah, the Grant Delpit, Devin Bush, they are fast to the football. They're fast downhill, and they have to be because they're not very big. And we just mentioned Dalvin Tomlinson, he's excellent. He's excellent. So you got to kind of account for all those different pieces. However, when there is a crease and the linebackers get up to the second level, they're not big linebackers. They're not big guys. So you can move them off the spot and you can create a crease. It's just, what is that wrinkle? Because I don't think if you run, one of our most successful runs or one of the Commanders' most successful runs this year has been the play side guard center pull to the front side of the run. I think that fits in what they really want to do well, which is run fast to the football, box it in, and kind of run sideline to sideline. I think you want to think more attacking downhill, more vertical runs. And obviously you want to sprinkle in both, but I would expect the emphasis to shift a little bit because when you look at the runs that have been successful, it's been we're going to run right at you and we're going to make you stop. We're going to make you fit these runs and we're going to be a little bit more physical. We're going to negate your athleticism a little bit. So I think that's something I would expect to see. And then the change-up be what you described, like the perimeter runs, the screen games, get outside, and because they're so used to running downhill, you've created space horizontally. And Cliff's done a great job of that, of having a great feel for that, no matter the opponent. I think when you look at New York Giants, for example, obviously Dexter Lawrence is one of the best defensive tackles in football, and they came out with a ton of perimeter screens early, and then they've kind of earned the right later in the game to attack the interior because they had displaced people. So Cliff, I trust him to come up with an excellent plan because he's shown the ability to do that, but I think the wrinkle this week will be really interesting. I would probably attack downhill first and then work the perimeter second. But, Cliff's a smarter guy than me, so can't wait to see what he does.
Well, I think you could also look at some of the misdirection stuff that they've done and be like, can you get those guys running fast the wrong way? And that's
because they do run. They will run fast the wrong way. They will do that.
So Cliff's been so good with misdirection. It was funny talking to Schlereth because he talked about that first play against Cincinnati where they pulled guys away from the play and then countered back with Eckler and got a huge gain or 8-yard gain, like basically untouched because guys just ran away from the play. And Mark was like, I pulled that for Cliff because I wanted to ask him. He's like, I don't know what to call this. Like, I've never seen this. What is this? And Mark's, a former offensive lineman that's been, now an analyst for 20 years, played for Mike Shanahan, knows the run game inside and out, played for Joe Gibbs, knows the run game pretty darn well. Whoa. And he's like, I've never seen this and I have no idea what it is. And I don't even know what to call it. So there definitely is, when it comes to coming up with wrinkles, Cliff's certainly got a few in his bag. And then obviously the quarterback run game, I think, is the other part of this, right? Like that's the way you can use aggressiveness against people is like, hey, you get really aggressive, stop in B-Rob. Well, Jayden's going to pull one and get to the outside. So I think that's definitely going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, and again, I don't know how effective the quarterback run game is because if they play it well, Zadarius Smith's a beast, as a run defender.
And I also don't want to leave Myles Garrett unblocked on principle.
Yeah, just that's something I would kind of just be like, if they are going to do a lot of quarterback run stuff, how do they get to that? Like, what's the plan to make that more efficient? Because, like you said, they're athletically on the edge pretty gosh darn good. I mean, Myles Garrett, watching him is very fun and very special because there's no other athlete like him in the NFL, and there's no other athlete that was playing when I was playing. It's for the last 20 years. There's been nobody that I've seen that's been that plays.
You mean there's not a lot of dudes walking around that are 6'5", 295, have 40-inch verticals and 4.40s?
No, there's not a lot of people like that, Craig. Surprisingly, and so yeah, on principle, I'm like, I don't know if I want Jayden Daniels trying to zone read that guy because he could easily play both. So to your point, what's the wrinkle to make? Because that's been a big part of the offense. So what's the wrinkle this week to make sure that Jayden does get his touches in the run game? They've been pretty good about giving him, 4 to 5 design rushes. The rest have been scrambles. But what does that look like this week? I think is going to be really important. Maybe you run a little bit more kind of GT stuff with him, which you saw versus Tampa Bay, because you're actually blocking that edge player and you can kind of get a jet sweep action away. We'll see. I'm really, again, because of the front, I'm really curious to see how they attack it. Obviously, you're going to do what you do well, which is you're going to run the ball. You're going to run the runs you feel comfortable with. But I do think there will be an interesting wrinkle just to account for some of the athleticism and size that the Cleveland Brown front presents.
Yeah. The other thing that I'll say real quick, I am curious personnel as well, because, if Cleveland's a little smaller on the second level, Washington's done so well out of 13 personnel. Can guys like Bates and Sinnott, and to an extent, Zach Ertz, like, can they be solutions there? Like, they're great blockers who are also really mobile. And so that seems like it would be a pretty good way to maybe combat some of what Cleveland does. Also see, can you get some of those guys off the field in favor of different personnel that you maybe like a little bit better if they go a little heavier? So that's something to watch. Cliff playing the personnel game, which he's played masterfully all year long. Of course, one way, Logan, like you said, they can make the Browns' defense less effective is leave them on the field a lot, which would, of course, come down to the Washington defense doing their part and shutting down a Browns offense that has struggled mightily this year. I know you said Watson probably had his best game against Las Vegas, but it still wasn't exactly spectacular. They haven't run the ball nearly as effectively as they had. Quick injury updates real quick. And we should say, like, Myles Garrett didn't practice on Wednesday. He's probably playing. But yeah, he has an Achilles thing that they're probably managing, but something to watch. We record this, as I think folks know by now, on Thursday morning, so we don't have the latest injury report by the time you listen to it probably. But also, like, Wyatt Teller's been on the injury list, didn't practice on Wednesdays. There's a lot of injuries on the Cleveland side of things, but Nick Chubb has been activated in terms of the practice window, but he was the last guy going through drills for them. So even if they were to activate him for the weekend, like, he's not getting a full complement of carries if he even plays at all. So the Cleveland offense, as it has been, is largely what it is going to be from a personnel standpoint. So what does that mean in terms of the challenge that Joe Witt and company face?
Is David Njoku? Is he? I know he's been
Same thing. He's banged up, and I think he missed practice on Wednesday, or was limited in practice on Wednesday, and so we'll have to see by the time Sunday rolls around.
Yeah, so when you watch the Cleveland offense, I think it's a story that Washington Commanders fans are going to be very familiar with. They bring in Ken Dorsey, a guy that developed, obviously, Josh Allen, and always gets me every single time, Josh Allen, and they run a kind of, it's more of a spread out offense. And so one of the things that they do is they're going to pass the ball to run the football, very similar to what Eric Bieniemy did last year. And so they lead the NFL in pass attempts. They're last in the NFL in rush attempts. And you see you see the impact on the roster. So last year, their offensive line was one of the best in football. This year, obviously, their starting tackle is hurt. Conklin has been out for a couple of weeks now. I don't know if he's going to be back this game or not. But for example, DeJuan Jones was one of the higher graded pass protecting offensive linemen in the NFL last year. He's at a 52%. Like he's seen a huge regression. Zach Zinter is a rookie starting right guard, obviously struggling pretty bad. Everybody in the offensive line has hit a pretty big regression. And I say it's because you're throwing the ball a ton. You're putting those guys on islands. You're asking them to do harder stuff in protections. And when you look at the pass concepts that they're running, I think this is a really cool thing that Buffalo did with Josh Allen is they run a lot of quick game. But when you look at Deshaun Watson, he is not a quick game quarterback necessarily. Like when I played with him when I was in Houston, he's a guy that you want to kind of take a 5-step drop, let everything get down the field, let him create a little bit, and let him push the ball vertically down the field. Because when you watch his release, he's got a kind of an elongated stride. The ball kind of loops back. So even though he's seeing it okay, the ball takes a little bit longer to get from his hand to the receiver. And so you're running like a slant. It's open. He's anticipating the throw, but it ends up feeling like it's late. And when you compare that to Jayden Daniels, for example, like Jayden gets that thing out like a laser beam, and you see how beneficial that is for the functioning of a quick game offense. So I feel like they've kind of miscast Deshaun Watson in this role. They've got away from what's made them successful over the last couple of years, which is running the football, heavy personnel groupings. That's not really a part of their offense anymore. Their number one play in terms of running the football is a draw. So they've totally shifted. So this offense does present challenges. And when you look at specifically the Las Vegas game, like there's a 83-yard touchdown call back. Amari Cooper has 2 drops in this game that would have been a huge explosive plays that would have been high leverage throws by Deshaun Watson. So a part of me is like, is Deshaun seeing it better and he's not getting the support from the rest of this offense because it is timing driven, right? So with Amari Cooper, like it's going to be a tight throwing window. You got to make a tough catch. And so that's something that I'm kind of curious to see are they turning a corner from a pass game standpoint? But in terms of identity, they're not. I think they've miscast Deshaun Watson with the type of pass game they're deploying. I don't think they've got the right type of offensive lineman necessarily for the run game that they're trying to deploy. It's really dependent on Deshaun being excellent all the time. And as we've seen last year, when the quarterback's not a top 3 player, that is a tough way to run an offense.
Yeah. It's a mess. Like it is a mess in a million ways. But it's kind of wild to watch them and be like, man, this offensive line's not that good because Cleveland's offensive line has been one of the best in the league for like 5-6 years running. And to your point, like
it's a lot of the same guys.
Yeah, part of it's schematic. Like Wyatt Teller's on IR now, but even earlier in the season, like he was struggling, and now you have to replace him with a rookie. But like it's weird watching Wyatt Teller get beat or not stick on run blocks, and a guy that's one of the best in the league. Joel Bitonio at the other guard, same thing. So it's kind of bizarre to watch them just struggle. I mean, Watson's been sacked, I think it's 19 times this year in 4 games.
And some of that's on him.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. But like it's this combo of an offensive line that is used to being insulated and is really good when deployed properly, mixed with a quarterback who does not see the field particularly well and get the ball out particularly well. Receivers that, like, outside of Amari Cooper, there's
Jerry Jeudy's done a good job.
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy's like he's good. He'll hurt you if you let him, but he's not top 10 caliber, top 15, top 20 like you thought maybe when he was coming out of Alabama. So I think that there is an opportunity for Washington here to, like, can you get your pass rush right this week? Can you come into this game really hungry? I would say also, like, if I'm Frankie Louvu watching Cleveland tape, I am licking my chops, because I think that there's opportunities for him to come on delayed blitzes and things like that when Watson scrambles out. And you see a couple of times when that happens, like linebackers that are playing zone coverage, Watson breaks the pocket and they go after him and get him. And I would say, licking my chops, not just the opportunity to get sacks, but Watson's pretty loose with the football. And so from a turnover standpoint, I think you got to try to, attack the football this week with him specifically, because he can hurt you running. He will get out, but he carries that thing real loose. And so rallying to the football, getting bodies there, and the potential to create turnovers in the same way that they, Luvu forced the fumble last week, right? You come in late, you get a punch or you get a nice hit on the ball. Like, I think those opportunities exist for Washington. Although, obviously, like, that's not to say, like, hey, easy day at the office. It's the NFL. There are no easy days in the office. I would just characterize it after watching them as there's going to be a lot of opportunities at the office this week, and it's going to come down to whether they can execute and ultimately take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I think with the offensive line specifically, I'm glad you brought up the Frankie Luvu thing. They are, in one-on-one situations, they're not bad. But I think the thing that you see them struggling with is when there is indecision. Because I think when you talked about last year how they were more insulated, they were running the football more, they weren't in as much drop back. Here, it's very similar to the pass protection you see up in Buffalo, obviously, because the offensive coordinator was just there, Ken Dorsey. The thing they have a hard time with is passing off stunts and identifying blitzers. So, for example, let's say I'm to the 2-man side in a pass protection as an empty protection. We saw this a ton last year with Eric Bieniemy too, because we were in so many 5-man protections. If there's 3 rushers to the side of the 2-man protection, I, as the right tackle, have to squeeze the inside pressure. So there's a good chance that defensive end is just going to run straight to the quarterback. But what I've seen a bunch is them not knowing that they have to squeeze, or they're late to the squeeze. And so that linebacker that is running really like right in the B gap there just runs straight to the quarterback untouched. So if I'm Joe Witt Jr., like, I'm looking at some of the stuff that we did in training camp, some of the stuff we pulled out versus Tampa Bay, and being like, let's see if these dudes can handle this. Because right now, they haven't shown a great ability. And again, like, let's look at the right side of the offensive line. DeJuan Jones, in a one-on-one situation, will beat most people in the NFL. We've seen him last year. We saw him lock up TJ Watt. I've seen him lock up some of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But when you give that guy a minute's pause and he's not playing next to Zittler, what's the guard's name?
Zinter.
Teller. But like, he's not
Teller,
playing next to Teller anymore, right? He's playing next to Zinter, who's a rookie. You can just tell those two. It's like the blind leading the blind. So I'm going to be like, hey man, both of you are very physically good individually, but together you're not playing very well. So let's see if we can give you guys a lot of different stuff to look at. Let's see if we can give you a lot of different angles and stunts to pass off. Because right now they don't seem like they're on the same page enough to stop that kind of thing. So I think that's, in terms of matchup, something I've got circled with a red pen to be like, let's see if we can exploit this. And like you said, Deshaun Watson, best game against Las Vegas, made some plays with his feet, is loose with the football, but let's keep him unsettled. And I think you can do that with this offensive line in their current construction. And I think Joe Witt Jr. has the tools to get that done.
Yeah, and it's, by the way, DeJuan Jones, he's banged up a little bit. He's got a knee. He was limited. His backup
Is he really?
Yeah, Jack Conklin, who I don't like the way they've got it listed on ESPN. Conklin's actually the starter and Jones is the backup. Either way, one of those dudes is going to play right tackle. They're both on the injury report. Yeah. Conklin's got a hamstring. He's a DNP on Wednesday. Jones is limited. Let's see. You got 4 tackles for Cleveland on the injury report on
who else is on the injury report?
Conklin, Jedrick Willis, James Hudson, DeJuan Jones, Njoku's on there.
To give you some context, Conklin's the starter, Willis is the starter, DeJuan Jones is the swing tackle, and Hudson is the 4th guy. So all 4 of their starting tackles, the guys that have played a lot of minutes this year, are on the injury report. That's not.
By the way, so is Ethan Pocic, their starting center. He was a DNP. So
it's a tough way to start the week, I'll tell you.
Yeah. On the back end, what kind of structure is Joe Witt looking at this week? Last week they wound up doing, I think, exactly what you said. Like, hey, let's make sure we stop the run. Let's, there's going to be some opportunities, but we're going to trust our guys, and the guys did a really good job. What do you see this week for kind of who is back there? Personnel wise, is it more nickel? Is it more the 3 safety look? Yeah. Is this a week where you're good with Emmanuel Forbes out there? You go in different bodies. and I don't mean to single out Forbes, just like he was part of that rotation last week. Like what do you expect from the rotation, and then what kind of structure are they playing in?
Obviously, I don't have any inside baseball on this. This is just what I would do. I'd probably go a lot more dime this week, just because I think dime gives. I'd probably go dime with Frankie Louvu as some type of pass rusher, just because I think they want to spread you out. They want to get you in space. And so one of the things I think when you look at Dan Quinn's defense and when you look at Dallas's defense, they played them week 1 this year. Like they have a lot of similar DNA to each other, and it was very successful early on because they're able to kind of get more. They get better space players in space defensively, which helps kind of cloud windows and cover concepts up. And obviously that if you do that, you really need the 4-man rush or the 5-man rush to get home and create a little bit of pressure, which this week I just talked about. If you just lined up 4 guys and had them rush into the offensive line, you're not going to get what you want. But if you move them around, stunt, bring some simulated pressures, do some different things, I definitely think you can. So that's really encouraging. Now, another huge element to that is Deshaun Watson, again, over the last probably 2 games, has been more active as a playmaker in the vein of Jayden Daniels. And what I mean by that is he's not running for, 200 yards, but he's done a good job of stealing first downs, kind of like Daniel Jones did in 2021 or 2022, whatever year that was when they made the playoffs.
Yeah.
Of picking moments to scramble, making plays with his legs, getting out of sacks. So you do need to account for that because you don't want that offense to get on rhythm because he's running. But I think getting people in space, maybe Frankie Louvu's the spy, maybe you bring some type of interesting zone pressures, I think that gives you a shot. And I think you can do more of that because of the great disparity in pass to run percentage here. They've shown they're not going to run the ball that much. They don't want to run the ball that much. So, okay, you're not great at throwing the ball either. So let's just make sure we play good coverage and bring pressure. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like you're a team that wants to throw a ton. You're not super efficient at it and even if Deshaun Watson did play better last week, Amari Cooper drops 2 balls and one's called back that would have been 200 yards receiving. So the receivers aren't playing great. The quarterback's not playing great. The O-line's not playing great. Keep them not playing great. Just be semi-conservative with your coverage structure, probably more zones, right? So you can keep eyes on Deshaun Watson and make sure we're being creative and innovative in our one-on-one pass rush setup. I think that's probably the key to me. Get space players on the field, play conservative coverage structure, and let's find ways to be innovative with our pass rush.
Yeah, no, and they've done a great job of that the last couple of weeks. They've moved guys around. Payne's been lining up all over the place. Newton's lined up all over the place. Louvu's obviously moving around a ton, so it's going to be fun to watch. Sunday, 1 o'clock, Northwest Stadium. We will be there, so that means we will be together afterwards for the postgame show, which is always fun. Up in one of the booths there at Northwest Field. We got the field behind us. It looks very professional, Logan. We're just 2 guys up there talking ball.
Talking ball.
Love to see it. So we'll be there on Sunday, probably around 5:30, 6 o'clock, sometime in there. But here's the thing. If you subscribe to the Team 980 or 106.7 The Fan on YouTube and you put on the alerts for when we go live, then you'll know. You'll get a little alert on your phone and be like, hey, Take Command post-game show is live. And then you can click it, or you can go to your smart TV or whatever device you want to watch on, and you can watch us there. And of course, if you're like, that's great, but I want to listen on my time, we'll put in the podcast feed immediately after, and then you guys can check us out in audio form there. Then, of course, back on Tuesday for the film review, Thursday for preview of the Ravens game, et cetera, et cetera. You know the drill. In the meantime, check out Logan on Command Center and all the work he's doing over with the Commanders. And I'll see y'all on the radio 4 to 7 on the Team 980. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.